viimastel päevadel Tõnismäel ja pealinnas toimunu on küll aknuspadel. Baltic states has become the 17th member of the Union.
It is often described as NATO's Achilles heel.
Look at this region. This should not be this stable. We are talking about the Baltic states. First, Russia took it, then it broke free. Then the Soviets came and grabbed it again. Then Germany showed up and the Soviets came back again. No other EU country under ex-Soviet rule is this stable today. The Baltic states got hit just as hard, or maybe even harder, but today they have streets without holes, buses on times, and offices where people do not ask for bribes. And the interesting thing that they should be corrupt and they should have failed by now. They should be like Romania, Hungary, or other Eastern Bloc EU countries. So what happened? How can they be this stable? So first they got rid of every KGB agent. I mean ex-KGB agents. But how? How do you get rid of an enemy that you don't know where to find? Well, first they used ex-KGB files, and if your name was on the list, you were out. And this simply changed everything. Estonia moved ahead while other Eastern EU countries just simply stayed behind. For example, Romania was led by an ex-communist party, ex-communist officials in a newly reformed party after the revolution for 32 years. And they are led by that party till this day. They are still in the parliament and have majority. Of course, they are not communist today, while Estonians choose a 32-year-old history nerd named Mart Laar who had zero political experience. And I think that's why they picked him, because he was not trained in the old system. And guess what he does? He read only one book on economy and based much of Estonia's early economic transformation on it. And of course he had a good team behind him. Younger people in suits with laptops instead of old corrupt politicians. And this actually turned a poor country into one with new buildings and internet jobs. And this is a huge flex because they actually succeeded. After this, it's logical to think that the Baltic states wiped into eternal peace because they are so small and quiet and they just do their jobs. They train soldiers, put computers in schools and fix roads, while other Eastern European countries swung between populism and chaos at this time. Well, it would be good, but that's actually not what happened. The fun part about the Baltics that they became boringly functional, and in the last 30 years that's simply power and stability. But here's the real question: if they are so good, so stable, and everything just works, why people leave? Because the West simply pays better. A nurse in Vilnius makes 700 EU a month, while in Sweden they make 2,500 at an entry level. And I know it's easy to blame money as the first cause of migration, but in reality, people do not really want to leave parents and friends behind unless they really think that things will get worse. While the root of the Baltic people leaving is because they still remember bad times when you could have your family taken from you in one night. For 50 years, Baltic people lived in a system where everything could be taken from you overnight. Your family, your land, your rights, everything. And that fear got passed down. So when the borders opened, the first thing was to leave while they can. And look, this is not just a Baltic phenomenon, this is there on every Eastern EU country that once was under Soviet rule. Of course, but let's just get back to the Baltic states, and I think there's one more reason why they are struggling with a migration crisis. It's a really small region, and when you're this small and you have ambitious people in tech, in art or anything, they hit a ceiling really fast. So it's not always about escaping poverty, it can be about finding a bigger stage for your talents. And one of the worst things geopolitically is that they border Russia, and I know they joined NATO, and that's really good and stable. It brings a good stability in your day-to-day life, being part of NATO. But come on, you are still neighbor of Russia, people are still nervous. And here's when the real story begins. When we look at the Baltic states, we say, oh, look how well they built. But it's not about that they built with confidence, it's about they built while running. So every big change we see, like using cards instead of paper IDs, putting corrupt politicians in jail, they did all this because it was necessary for them. They had no other option. Voting online stops dishonest people from cheating elections. Joining NATO was like going into a safe room while in danger. They were not chasing dreams, they were just escaping the Soviet curse. And they did it really fast. And when you are running this fast, you risk losing something. You risk losing the visible markers of culture. Or at least you lose that kind of culture that needs time, history, and slow moments to grow. Culture is messy, slow, and personal. You can't streamline it nor code it. Now, do not get me wrong, I'm not saying that the Baltic states don't have their own cultures. Their culture is quiet, subtle, and a lot of the times it's hidden behind that efficiency that they have. That's the question, how do you keep your identity alive when you run this fast into the future? But here is a deeper fear. What if that future it's not actually that safe? So let me show you how this statue almost took down a country. This is called the Bronze Soldier statue, and they wanted to move it in 2007.
Viimastel päevadel Tõnismäel ja pealinnas toimunu on kui lakmuspaber, mis näitab, kas riik ikka suudab käituda riigina. Riik ei tähenda seejuures ainult võimuotsuseid, nagu näiteks otsus sõduri teisaldamisega enam mitte venitada. Riik on ka kodanik.
For Estonians, this was a sign of occupation, but for the Russian-speaking minority, the statue meant liberation. It's the same object, but two different stories. So we're in 2007, when Estonia decides to relocate the statue from the middle of the capital. And riots. The worst kind of riot that Estonia has ever seen since independence. Looting, arson, and chaos in the streets. 1 dead and hundreds arrested. But the real twist was not on the streets, it was more ideological. It was more about identity and control. Estonia learned fast, they joined the EU, NATO, they reinforced their digital systems, they became global leaders in cyber defense, and all of this because of a statue. So this was a message that in the 21st century, war does not start with bombs, or maybe sometimes it is, but in general it starts with a memory. So they survived riots, cyberware, and a year later the economy collapsed. In 2008. I know this is really overtalked on the internet and it kind of gets boring, but in the Baltic states case, it is really interesting because there it was not just a recession, it was a complete economic wipeout. Latvia's GDP shrank by 20%, and that's something like a Great Depression level collapse. Foreign investors pulled out, the real estate crashed, and of course people lost jobs. Fast. Public workers got pay cuts and pensions were frozen. The Baltics made a huge call. Cut everything. Instead of devaluing your currency or printing more money, you need to cut budgets. Hard. And they did that. Teachers, nurses, and police officers. Everyone took a hit. And the crazy part is that it worked. By 2011, growth came back. Fast. These countries did not default. They did not spiral into chaos. Instead, they become Europe's weird comeback story. This was not only about the numbers, it was also about trust. And the governments were blunt, transparent. They said, this will hurt, but we're all in it. And the people believed them. So yes, for the most years, the Baltic states went from Soviet ghost states to riots, to cyber attacks, to financial collapse, to a weird comeback story. And just as they were catching their breath, Crimea happened. Of course, we know it, it's overtalked, some people are bored of it, but for the Baltics, this hit really different. For older generations, this was not some random geopolitical event. This was something familiar. Families who have survived Russian tanks, deportations, language bans now watch the same thing to happen again just south of them. So the Baltic states snapped into action. NATO boots hit the ground and fighter jets started to circle. Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania began rearming fast, above NATO's 2% spending target. And that's a really big thing to do. Lithuania brought back the draft and Estonia doubled down on cyber defense. And volunteer militaries, they boomed. This was not paranoia, it was pattern recognition. The Baltic states know what it's like to be ignored when Russian tanks roll in. And of course, they were not going to wait this time. So they built something new, a layered defense, a digital firewall, a society. If it ever comes to it, it will fight back. Because surviving an economic collapse is one thing, but surviving Russia, it's personal for them. So how do you move on from occupation, an economic collapse, and a threat of invasion again? The Baltic states did not just recover, they reinvented themselves. Estonia became e-Estonia. You can vote, pay taxes, or even open a company online. Latvia turned Riga into a fintech hub buzzing with startups and coders. Lithuania has huge gaming studios, biotech, and even rural farmers are selling cheese and honey online across Europe. And that's madness. These countries skipped legacy systems, just bold ideas and urgency. They turned pain into progress and became one of the most agile, transparent, and digital societies in the world today. Not despite their past, but because of it. The real power of the Baltic states, it's not their tech or their budgets, or how well they played the NATO game. It's just maybe that they remember. Behind every policy is pain. Behind every startup, a scar. Because this story, this Baltic story, it's not just a comeback, it's a blueprint that every Eastern European country should have followed. Sadly, I think it's too late. Because when people look at the Baltic states, they might say, wow, look how stable they are, as I did on the thumbnail. But that's not the right approach. They are stable because they ran faster than they fear. Because they built while running, and maybe they are still running. So yeah.